What's happening, friends? Dan here, and today I'm excited because I'm going to get back to something I love doing, and that's teaching Spring Boot for absolute beginners. In today's tutorial, I'm going to help you create your very first Spring Boot application using a new quick start guide from the spring.io website. So we're going to take a look at this guide. We'll go through it together. I'll give you my thoughts on it, and we'll do it right after this. Welcome back, friends. If you don't know, my name is Dan Vega, and I run the website danvega.dev. If you want to head over there, you can learn a little bit more about me. Subscribe to my newsletter, Coffee and Code, which goes out every Sunday morning, where I just tell you a little bit about what I was up to that week and some really cool things that I found across the web. So with that, let's go ahead and get into today's tutorial. All right, so here I am on the Spring.io website. So they actually recently updated this website. There's a news article here announcing the new Spring website. Really love the design, nice and clean, easy to find stuff, very welcoming. So if you want to, go ahead and read through kind of what their goals were with the new website. But I'm really pleased with it. Not that my opinion matters to them, but I really like it. Nice and clean and easy to get around. So if you want to, take a minute to tour the website. But right here on the home, we have a couple of things. So if you're new to Spring Boot and you want to know why Spring, like what is it about Spring that I should care about? What makes this framework so great? So there's some really great information here. Nice quote, a video that you can watch through, and just some information, some high-level stuff on what Spring is, what it can do, and you can kind of drill further down to see some more information. But I find the easiest way to get familiar with something like a new framework is to jump in and start coding. So they have these really great guides here. So if you look and you go to Learn, there's an overview, quick start, guides, and a blog. You can also get to the quick start here on the home page, and that's what we're going to go through today. So if you want, I will leave a description below, but it's spring.io/quickstart. And this is going to be this is going to help you kind of create your first Spring Boot application. And also, if you look below, I should have some learning objectives, kind of if you want to understand like what you're going to get out of this today. I've laid those out below as well. So with that, let's get into it. So what you're going to build, you're going to build a classic Hello World endpoint, which any browser can connect to. You can even tell it your name and it will respond in a more friendly way. So what we're doing here is essentially we're creating a REST endpoint to respond to a particular path, and it's going to respond with a string that can be seen in the browser because we're just using a traditional GET request. You can also go ahead and use something like a Postman or any tool that you can use to kind of connect to a REST endpoint and see the same there. So what are you going to need to get this done? So you're going to need some type of IDE/text editor. Some popular choices: IntelliJ IDEA, Spring Tools, Visual Studio Code, or Eclipse. So three of those are kind of more IDE-ish. IntelliJ IDEA, Spring Tools, and Eclipse. Very good IDEs. All provide fantastic support for Java and Spring out of the box. Visual Studio Code is a text editor. If you've been around, I'm sure you've heard of it. Plenty of really great plugins for both Java and Spring there. So if you want to use that, that's great. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use IntelliJ today. It is one of my favorite Java IDEs. Now there is two versions of IntelliJ. So if we head over to IntelliJ IDEA and we look at it, again, if this is your first time kind of in this world, you can go to download, and there's two versions. There's the Ultimate and the Community. So if you haven't downloaded Ultimate before, you can download a free trial. So I'd suggest doing that. I actually pay for Ultimate every month, probably like 14, 15 bucks a month. It's just a fantastic IDE, and I like the monthly feature. So that's an option as well. but there is a community edition as well that you don't have to pay for. Now, what the Ultimate Edition is going to give you is basically right within the IDE, you can kind of bootstrap your application really quickly. So you can go through this wizard that we're going to go through on the web right within the IDE. And that's the real big advantage right there. And there are obviously some other things, but those are your choices. Again, you don't need anything. We can do this in a text editor if you wanted to. I'm going to use IntelliJ. You can use Visual Studio Code too. If you're interested, I will link a video up in the upper right, left. I can never remember what it is. And I'll also put a link below, but I've done a couple of videos on using Visual Studio Code for Spring Boot development before. So if that is something you're familiar with, maybe you can use that. Okay, so enough of that spiel. You're going to need one of those IDEs. You're also going to need a Java development kit. So we recommend Adopt OpenJDK version 8 or 11. So whatever you're using is fine. Let's go ahead and look. I'm actually going to be using Java 1.8 or Java 8, but you can use whatever you want. No big deal there. Cool. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to start a new Spring Boot project. And to do that, we're going to use start.spring.io. We're going to create a web project in the dependency section. Let's talk kind of through all of that. You can read through this, but I'm just going to kind of talk through these different instructions here. So this is the Spring Initializer. It allows you to bootstrap your application. You can choose Maven or Gradle. You can choose your language. So by default, it's going to be Java, but if you wanted to use something like Kotlin or Groovy, you can. Spring Boot, this is the version. So this is the current version it's going to use. The instructions tell us that we should just go ahead and keep this the same. This is our group name, so com.example. The name of the project is demo, so we're going to keep that. You could drill into some more options if you wanted to. So if you were on Java 11 or Java 13, you can go ahead and choose that in here. And then we're going to choose dependencies. So it has this little search box where you can search. You can also list them all out and kind of check them as you go. So if I click one, you'll see one selected over there. And then if I go back to the search, you can see that my selected dependencies right now are Spring Boot Dev Tools. I'm actually going to unselect that for now. But what dependencies are, I often like to think of it as ingredients to a recipe. So if our recipe today is to create a Spring Boot Hello World endpoint, what are the ingredients that we need to create that? And so for us, all we really need today is web. So we're creating a web application that includes a RESTful application using Spring MVC. It uses Apache Tomcat by the default as an embedded container. So there are other things. There are a lot of dependencies that you'll start to use as your application grows in complexity. But for now, that's all we're going to really use. You can also use this cool little explore control space. It actually shows you, based on what you've selected so far, what your project is going to look like. So at this point, I'm just going to go ahead and hit generate. And what it's going to do is it's going to download this demo1.zip. So if I look at it, it's actually on my other screen, no big deal. But we're going to actually pull that in through IntelliJ. So if you have IntelliJ open, you'll either be on a start screen where it asks you to create a new project, or here I'm in an existing project from a previous tutorial. I'm just going to go into new project from existing sources because I have the sources on the hard drive already. And I'm going to go into downloads and my demo1.zip, which I didn't unzip yet. I'm going to go ahead and unzip and you'll see it there. So I go into this folder, and what I want to do is I want to select the pom.xml. And so IntelliJ is going to look at that and go, okay, what do you want to do with that? I'm going to say I want to go ahead and open that up in this window. IntelliJ is going to do its stuff, basically looking at the POM. This is a Maven project, and it's going to go ahead and download any of the dependencies that it needs to create this project. So we're just going to let that run for a second, and we'll get back to the quick start. One thing that it says underneath, I'm going back to the, let's go back here. So if we look at this, this basically says projects created by start.spring.io contain Spring Boot, a framework that makes Spring ready to work inside your app, but without much code or configuration required. Spring Boot is the quickest and most popular way to start Spring applications, and I would completely agree with that. So what it's saying is we're going to add some code now. It says open up your project ID and locate the demo application.java file in source main java.com example demo folder. And what we're going to do is change the contents of the file by adding an extra method and annotation shown below. So you can look at this, but instead of just copy and pasting, I'd like to go ahead and talk through what we're doing here. So if we go into demo and we go into source main Java com.example demo, and then there's demo application. Sometimes when you open up code, it'll automatically be folded for you. So if you just hit that plus, it's unfolded for me now. Okay, I just went ahead and bumped the font size up just to make sure that it's readable. If you have some issues with it, please let me know below. So here we are in our main Spring Boot application. If we wanted to run it, we can kind of hit this play button here on both the class level and the method, and it would start the application up, but at this point it wouldn't do a lot. So what we want to do is we want to actually make this main class a controller. Again, we're going to use the code that the quick start is telling us, and then I actually am going to refactor this a little and just kind of give you my thoughts on that. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to use something called an annotation. And if we start typing out REST controller, you'll see this pop up. If we hit enter, it'll import what it needs to import. So it's importing the class REST controller. And we are annotating this class with the REST controller annotation, which basically marks this as a controller class, and it says, or a REST controller class. And basically says anytime that you hit an endpoint now, anytime that you hit a public method that has a request mapping on it, I want you to go ahead and serve up, and in our case, the default is JSON data instead of some type of HTML view. So that's perfect in our case because we don't want to build HTML templates here. We are just building a REST endpoint that a browser or a tool could go ahead and hit. So what I'm going to do is actually come in here and create a method, and we'll say public. It's going to return a string. We'll name it hello, and it's going to return string.format hello. And then we're going to place something in here in a second. So what I want to do is actually accept an argument here too. So what I'm going to say is that this can take something called a request param. So in the request param, in the actual URL for the endpoint, if there is a request param, it's going to have a value of name, and it's also going to have a default value, which is nice. So if one is not supplied, then one will be supplied for us. We're going to give this a type of string, and we're going to name this variable name. So down here, I'm going to format this and say I want you to display name. So just again, we have a method called hello. It can take an argument, which is a request parameter from the URL. It's going to have a value of name, so it'll look like basically this. It'll look like HTTP localhost 8080, and it will be hello, and we'll talk about that in a second. But then it may have something like name Dan. Now the way that this is going to work is we're going to create a get mapping. So you might also see something like a request mapping. A get mapping is just a specialized annotation of request mapping with a type of get. So here we're saying this is going to accept a get request to the following path, and that path is going to be hello. And that is how we are going to get this URL here, because by default, it's going to start on port 8080. Its path is hello because we've told it here in the get mapping. And then it may accept a request parameter called name with a value, and this is going to be a string called name. And we're just going to go ahead and return a formatted version of that in the response. So let's go ahead and try it. So if we go back to this code, this kind of talks through everything I just talked through. Then it gives us the option to go ahead and try it. So it says here on Mac and Linux, we can run this Maven wrapper. So MVN is Maven. W stands for wrapper. That just means that you don't have to install Maven. As part of our project, there is a wrapper here that allows us to go ahead and run this. So if we run this command, that will start it up. On Windows, you can run this command. I'm also going to show you another way. But from terminal, I can go ahead and run this. If I wanted to, I can come over to my normal terminal, which is iTerm here, and I can run it there. If you're on Windows, you can run it from, say, Git Bash or whatever if you're running Linux subsystem there, that'll work as well. So I'm just going to paste that in, and I'm going to go ahead and hit enter, and we're going to see if it does anything. So it looks like everything's okay. It's starting up. You can see it started very quickly here. Started on port 8080, started application in 1.18 seconds. So now if we open up our browser and go to localhost 8080, we're basically going to get an error page because we don't have anything configured for the root URL. But if we go to hello, we can see that it is hello world. Now that is because we haven't supplied a name request parameter and the default value was world. If we want to come in here and say name equals Dan, I get that nice hello Dan. And that's because we're returning a formatted version of that string, and anything returned in that response is going to get converted over to what our default response type is, which is JSON, and that's going to get returned. So now I could easily, again, open up something like Postman or Insomnia, or if you're using Visual Studio Code, there's a great REST client plugin for that. Or whatever IDE you're using, there's great tools for that. So you could easily hit that from anywhere. But what I want to do is actually stop this. So I'm going to do Control-C. I'm going to exit out of this terminal. And what I'm going to do is refactor this and show you another way to run this. So we've kind of done everything in the main application class. But as your application starts to grow, you will want to split logic out into different classes. So one convention you'll see right away is creating a different package for something like a controller. So I'll say controllers, and in controllers, I'm going to create a new Java class, and I'm going to call this hello controller. So this is just a convention. This isn't required, but you will often see the name of the controller with the suffix of controller. So I'm just going to hit that. And what I'm going to do is start to move some of this code over there. So first off, I want to make it a REST controller, right? So I'm going to say REST controller. So now I'm going to remove that from here. I got to keep that Spring Boot application on there. Oops. Okay, so that removed that need for that import. Then what I'm going to do is copy all of this because this is what I want to be in there. Save that. And I'm going to move that in here. And as I paste that in there, you'll see one of the really big advantages of using a really great IDE like IntelliJ is you pasted that code in here and I automatically got all those imports brought into my application for me. So I'm going to go ahead and delete those here. So now this class is mainly just the main entry point to our application. So we don't need to do anything else in here. We have this hello controller. It is marked as a REST controller, and we do have a mapping of hello. Now, the only thing you'll need to be careful of is this package controllers. needs to live underneath this main package. So com.example.demo is where this main class is. If I were to come in here to create some whole new package structure and put my controller there, it won't work out of the box because it's not within the same package that our main application class is. There are ways to get that to work, but that's for another day. So now that I got my controller, now I can come in here. We can go ahead and start it from the command line again if we wanted to. Or as I said, we can actually come in here in IntelliJ and just go ahead and run the application by hitting that little play button. So as you'll see, it started up on port 8080. Actually started in less time than last time because we take advantage of some things are already done for us. And if we go ahead and refresh this, we get hello Dan, hello Jen, and if we take this off, we just get our hello world. So cool. That is, I think, everything we wanted to cover today. What I also want to talk about though is, so there's a bunch of really popular guides on here. So if we go up to learn and we go to guides, there are some really great guides on here. And they've separated them into like some really intro getting started guides. These are 15 to 30 minutes. Topical guides, which are 60 minutes or less, or tutorials, which are 2 to 3 hours. So I want your input on this. Did you find this particular tutorial useful? Did you like going through this guide together? If so, I would be really happy to go through 1, 2, or all of these guides with you guys. That would be a lot of fun for me, and I think we'd both learn a lot along the way. So if that's something that you're interested in, please leave me a comment below, and we will start working on those right away. So before we go, my question of the day, which I will leave below, I'd like to get your input on as well. What are your favorite frameworks or libraries in the Java ecosystem? I'll try and add mine, but I'd like to hear from you, so leave your answers below. And if you found value in this video, please leave me a thumbs up, smash that subscribe button or whatever you want to do to it. And as always, happy coding, friends.